data. If we take the amount of carbon for gasoline vehicle production and add to that the amount of annual emissions multiplied by T for time, and set this equal to the amount of carbon for electric vehicle production and add to that the amount of annual emissions also multiplied by T, then by solving for T, we get the exact number of years required in order for an electric car to have less lifetime emissions than a gasoline car. Putting in the numbers for the average gasoline vehicle in the United States against the average 30 kilowatt-hour battery electric car using the average energy mix, we find out that after just 1.67 years, an electric car is already producing less emissions than its gasoline competitor, with many, many years of useful life to come. In fact, even if you had to replace the battery, meaning you had the additional carbon of that second battery's production, you'd still break even in less than 3.5 years. And clearly batteries are going to last far longer than a couple years because manufacturers are providing 8-year, 100,000-mile warranties with them. Now, the story isn't quite as clean once you start getting into the higher capacity batteries. So doing the same car comparison with a 100 kilowatt-hour battery versus the average gasoline car results in 5.5 years needed to offset the carbon production. But 5.5 years is still way less than an electric car's useful life. Remember, these cars have very few moving parts and they require much less preventative maintenance than gasoline cars. And again, these are using conservative estimates for the carbon emissions related to battery production. If we go with more lenient estimates, a 30 kilowatt-hour electric car could offset its emissions in less than 4 months, and a 100 kilowatt-hour electric car in less than 2 years. Going back to national averages with conservative estimates, it's also important to see where your power comes from. For example, I live in the state of Idaho, where a small electric battery will be offset in just 1.1 years. And a larger electric car in just 3.6 years. If the majority of the state's energy comes from coal, however, like in West Virginia, a small EV takes 5.4 years, and a larger one takes as much as 17.8 years. So if you're driving a Tesla P100D in West Virginia, you're not doing the environment any favors. But you probably didn't have the environment in mind anyways when you were buying a crazy fast $135,000 sports sedan. Even using more generous carbon emissions numbers, it would take 6.1 years for a 100 kilowatt-hour electric car in West Virginia to produce less emissions than the average gasoline car. A smaller battery, however, would only take 1 year. So driving a car like the Leaf, even in a coal-powered state, is still better for the environment than a gasoline car. In fact, there isn't a single state in the US in which driving a purely gasoline-powered car is the greenest option. But likewise, driving an electric car isn't the best option in every state either, only in about half of the states. In the other half, it's better to drive a plug-in hybrid or a hybrid vehicle, which have smaller batteries and thus have less emissions. But as electricity production becomes greener in other areas, which it tends to do, an electric car becomes the best option.